Hi folks, what a week it's been. The July issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal is out and better than ever. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the real story of the last week has been the heat. It's been hot. Now you have to understand that Michigan hot isn't the same as like Florida hot or Arizona hot. That stuff is just insane. And if you live there, you should know that your brain's frying like an egg and that can't be good for it. Here in Michigan, we start whining when it gets like 80 degrees. And by 90, everything shuts down. I can't be in the workshop with swamp crack. It's just not productive. And since nobody likes to see a fat guy sweat, I spent a good amount of my time this past week off camera learning a new skill, wood carving. But Stumpy, you just made a video about wood carving. I did. Thank you for pointing that out. But my experience with the power chisel made me want to learn other forms of wood carving, particularly relief carving. Relief carving appeals to me because it's all about creating contrast. Before I was a woodworker, I was an artist, and I loved to create the illusion of depth through deep contrast. This is a portrait I did years ago using a technique called pointillism. It's mostly a bunch of tiny dots and squiggles, so to create depth, you had to use sharp contrast between the light and the dark areas. And by doing so, you can make a 2D picture look a little more three-dimensional, at least as much as you can with paper and ink. But relief carving takes the concept to a whole new level. Instead of using light and dark colors, you manipulate light itself. By lowering some objects while raising others, you create contrast through shadows. It's not true 3D, it's more like 2.5D. But to me, that 0.5 is where the artistic expression lives, and I want to learn how to do that. Now I do have a tiny amount of experience in relief carving. Did a little work with stone about 25 years ago, and I did a little bit of wood carving with a rotary tool maybe 15 years ago. But I want to learn traditional carving using chisels and gouges. So that's what I did this week. I don't mean that I learned all about wood carving in 1 week, not even close, but I learned many of the fundamentals, from choosing the right tools, how to sharpen them. I even turned my own carving mallet, and that's what I'm going to show you today. It's going to be fun. Let's start with the tools you'll need. Carving tools can cost a bundle. It's really insane. At 40 to 50 bucks a gouge, you can very quickly invest like $1,000 if you aren't careful. That's the problem I ran into. I'm one of those idiots who thinks that he has to have every tool before he can start a project. Carving tool sets were made for suckers like me. But you don't have to be an idiot. You can start small and grow your collection of gouges as you improve your carving skills. Pro carver Mary May suggests beginning with a small set of about 5 or 6 gouges. I'll post a link to them in the notes below the video so you can check it out. But don't let the word set confuse you. Pre-assembled carving sets are a bad investment. Sometimes I think they just throw their worst selling gouges into the sets just to get rid of them. Buy yours individually, beginning with the basics that you're going to need for your first project, and then add 1 or 2 at a time as future projects call for them. But where should you buy your gouges, and which brands are the best? The way I see it, you have 2 options. You can go for new, or you can go vintage. Let's discuss the pros and cons of the latter. I don't mean the pros and cons of ladders. I mean the good and the bad that comes with buying vintage gouges. Fortunately, carving gouges were made by the bucket load 100 years ago. Brands like Henry Taylor, Addis, Butcher, and early Buck Brothers are of excellent quality and fairly abundant. In fact, as a rule, if it looks really old, it's probably worth checking out. If it looks shiny and new, be skeptical, because places like eBay are flooded with both good vintage steel and cheap new tools that you're going to have to sharpen every 3 seconds or so. So when in doubt, try to find the brand marking in those blurry photos that the seller has posted, and then do a Google search to see what people who know about old tools say about that brand. Of course, many sellers will just say, I don't know anything about them, which is the biggest problem when buying vintage gouges online. You may get a good deal, especially if you buy them in larger lots, but you often don't really know what you're getting. Carving tools come in all sorts of different profiles, many of which look the same as each other in photos. The older versions often aren't marked, so how do you know if you're getting that number 5 8mm gouge you've been looking for, or if it's really a number 7 10mm? Well, tell me you can see the difference between the two in a photo that probably doesn't show the ends very well. So you can imagine how easy it is to buy a bunch of doubles and triples when you're trying to fill specific holes in your sets. It just goes with the territory. So you can roll the dice and try to resell them if you get gouges you don't need, or you can look into new tools so you know what you're getting. I went both routes. I've been thinking about carving for a while, so I began buying old tools on eBay. Then, after I learned what specific gouges I needed for my first projects that I wanted to do, I discovered that I had everything except the ones I needed. So I bought new tools to fill those gaps. In the end, I had assembled a set of about 35 gouges for about the price of a used car, when I really only needed 5 or 6 to get started. You see what I mean about how fast things can get away from you? Don't go down this rabbit hole. Start small and grow your collection slowly. So, you've got your gouges. What's next? You're probably going to need a mallet. These things come in all shapes and sizes, from compact brass chisel tappers to giant wooden tater mashers. Since I was already broke from buying all those gouges, I decided to turn my own mallet. And I'm glad I did. Not only did it save me about 40 bucks over the cost of a commercially made wooden mallet, but it was a lot of fun. It was also an excellent way to get rid of some of those scrap cutoffs that I've been saving up in my loft for God knows how long. I decided to go with white oak. I figure if it's tough enough for the hull of old Ironsides, it's tough enough to tap the end of a carving gouge. I don't use my lathe much. In fact, these carbide turning tools are still brand new, so I decided to use this opportunity to try them out. I left the head of the mallet as large as I could because I wanted as much weight as possible on the end. Of course, that extra size makes it a little awkward for light tapping, but that's the trade-off that comes with wooden carving mallets as compared to the more compact metal versions. We'll be making a short video about the turning process to help you make your own in the upcoming August 2016 issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. Now, we have our gouges, we have our mallet. Are we ready to carve? No, we still have to learn how to sharpen. Learning to sharpen your gouges is as important a skill as any in wood carving. Razor-sharp tools are a pleasure to use. They're safer, and they can mean the difference between a fantastic carving experience and a frustrating swear session that will turn you off the craft forever. As with any tool, there are a jillion ways to sharpen them. I'll put a link in the notes to a video that'll show you how to use diamond stones and leather strops. But since I have this nice, beautiful wet grinder here, I'm going to use that. And I'm glad I have it, because my vintage gouges needed a lot of work. Quite often, they'll come looking like this. The edge has been ground to a fingernail profile. Now, there are some specific situations where you may want this shape, but not very often. I asked Mary May what to do about it, and she said it's better to just leave them like this because you don't know how far up the shaft the maker tempered the steel. But what do I need with half a dozen fingernail gouges? They're pretty much useless to me as a beginning carver. So I went ahead and repaired the ones that wouldn't require me to grind too much off the length. This is the most dramatic example, but its larger size will make it easier for you to see how the process works. First, I use my stone grater to transform my Tormex wheel to the coarse grit, which is about 220. This will make it easier to grind a blunt end on my gouge. I want to take it all the way back until I restore the sharp corners. When I'm finished, you can see a crescent moon shape on the end of the gouge. This shape is your guide to proper gouge sharpening. Whether you're completely grinding away the end like I did, or just repairing a damaged edge, you want to blunt the end so that you get this crescent-shaped flat. On smaller chisels, it will be harder to see, so use a bright light to catch it. As I grind a new bevel on my gouge, I want to keep an eye on that shape. I'm only grinding where I have to make that crescent-shaped area disappear. I'm not going to grind evenly back and forth across the entire bevel. That will just give me another fingernail profile. Instead, I'm going to be grinding more from the center and less as I go up towards the corners, removing only that crescent-shaped flat. Once I get it down to a tiny sliver, I'm going to regrate my stone to the fine 1000 grit texture. This will slow down the removal of the material, which is important, because if I grind too much away in the middle of the gouge, or too much away at the corners, I'll end up with a misshapen edge, and I'll have to start all over. This can happen fast if you're not careful. Sharpening gouges is not the same as sharpening chisels. It's all about taking your time and keeping an eye on the end so that you can shape your bevel evenly. Once the light stops reflecting off the edge, I know I'm finished. Now this 1000 grit bevel is sharp, but not sharp enough for wood carving. I really need to polish it up for that. I can go straight over to the leather stropping wheels, but I have a secret weapon, a Japanese water stone wheel. This sucker is 4000 grit. I admit that not everyone is going to have one of these unless you're really into sharpening tools, and I mean obsessively into them. But it will put a nice polish on your edge, So much so that the manufacturer says I don't even need to strop it with leather wheels afterwards. Of course, that only applies to the outer beveled edge. The inside of the gouge will still need to be stropped on the profiled leather wheels. And if you don't have a Japanese Waterstone wheel, you can strop the outer bevel on the wide leather wheel as you would any other tool. Just be careful you don't round your edge over by holding it at too much of an angle. You may find it easier to actually hold your gouge this way so that you can rock it back and forth while keeping an eye on the bevel from above. Take your time and get them as sharp as possible before you begin your project, and then return to the stropping wheel every 15 minutes or so to touch them up. That way you'll keep them sharp, and you won't have to go back and spend all that time regrinding the edge unless you chip it or otherwise damage your edge. So we've got our tools. We've sharpened them all. Time to choose a project. There are all sorts of templates available online and in various books, but if you're just starting out in relief carving, you really should consider taking an online class from someone who is a skilled teacher, at least for your first project. You may think it's simply a matter of just pushing the gouge through the wood, but there are tips and techniques that make a huge difference. I selected a dogwood flower lesson from Mary May's website because I like dogs and I like flowers. I had to pay for it. In fact, I opted to get a monthly membership so I could take several lessons. And I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot of things that I didn't even know that I didn't know. For example, I learned how important it is to work with the grain, not just to avoid tearing the fibers, but to avoid chipping off delicate parts of the design, such as the points on the ends of leaves. I learned that I have to keep an eye on grain direction even when I'm defining the edges, using stop cuts to avoid splitting the surface into the wrong areas. I learned all sorts of things, and even though I made some mistakes, I was really encouraged with the way my first carving came out, and I enjoyed the process immensely. You can see a video of my carving process and the final results in the upcoming August issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. Which reminds me, did you check out the July issue yet? We've been working hard to include more content in each issue, and the July issue is the best one yet. There are 20 videos embedded in the pages, including some that were contributed by other well-known woodworkers. There's a new project gallery to show off the work of our readers and to help inspire your next project. We even added a question and answer column to discuss interesting tidbits, and the Just for Fun section is filled with humorous quotes. Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal is far more than just a newsletter. It's a digital woodworking magazine that's growing fast. Subscriptions are still free, so take advantage by visiting stumpynubs.com and clicking on the subscribe link. And don't forget, we send free tools to random subscribers. I just sent out a bunch of diamond sharpening gear, and we're going to be doing more soon. So subscribe today, then you can sit back and have yourself a cold one, because you've earned it, my friend.